All right, everybody, welcome back to another session of 5 Tips. Today, we're going to be talking about armor. Now, armor is so important in competitive matches. Teams will oftentimes plan the hell out of their armor openings because they know how big of an impact it can have. And today, we're going to be talking about this match on Utah between EGIG and HLL and go through a few examples here on what you should think about when you're planning your armor opening. My first tip is to really study the terrain, the key parts, the buildings, where you have cover, where you don't have cover, where you expect the enemy medium to come up, where you expect the allied light tanks to be. If you're able to study the terrain and understand where the enemy might be able to come from, if your medium is able to take out the enemy medium off the opening, it can have huge impacts down the line. Another way to think about it too is if your light tanks are able to get in position to support a point for the opening cap, meanwhile the enemy light tanks are getting wiped, then you can have also a huge advantage. And Utah here is a great example with win 7 as midpoint for this match between EGIG and FL. Let's go ahead and dive in here real quick. Here we have win 7, and so we're going to talk about the different spots which we usually see tanks approach this. Once again, all about understanding the terrain. Here we have this building on the west side of win 7. We have this building over here. And what we're going to see here is that both teams will have their light tanks want to support the point. Here we have a Lukes coming up, making their way, and then we'll see another Lukes making their way to behind this building. Now this building offers great cover because the Lukeses can park on either side of it and turn around or turn the slate to the corner and splash the point here and there and really help keep the infantry at bay. On the opposite side, from the ally side, the Stewies will move up and try to get in the building complex in between over by the 3-story, and they'll support the point by blasting fire right here. And the other Stewie will make its way to the north and splash fire from there. Meanwhile, in the background, both sides are playing the game to try to figure out where the enemy medium is. So these light tanks are hiding, doing their thing, and then the Recon tanks usually are thrown in random places off of the opening to sort of disrupt the back line or maybe try to wipe some outposts, that sort of thing. When these light tanks are pushing up, you have to think they're trying to maybe bait the enemy medium into pushing a certain angle, and that way their medium can catch them off guard and wipe them out. Because remember, as soon as the enemy medium gets wiped on the opening, that releases the light tanks and the Recon tanks to push up wherever they need to, as they only have to worry about AT. Let's go ahead and take a look how this situation evolved.
Nice round right there.
The Lukeses are pushing over to the left. Puma gets wiped.
That was the Puma, I think, right? Yes, opening Puma gets wiped. And the battle for win 7 can begin.
All right, now the Lukes are positioning themselves behind the building, as I mentioned, and they're offering support for the infantry, splashing inside. We see the Stewies making their way up and get position. We see the medium right back here, and they'll make their way as well. Once again, they're trying to get into cover and maybe wait for intel to understand where the Axis medium is. And then one Stewie's right here, getting into cover and splashing inside point. What you can see from this picture is that essentially both sides' light tanks are canceling out most of the infantry. Now, you could say right here, obviously the Axis light tanks are a little bit behind. There's plenty of Allied infantry here. And once again, the Allies are on the right side. Don't get confused by the logos. But the Allies infantry are pushing over into the point, but the Lukeses there are going to be there to splash around and maybe be able to wipe them out a little bit. But you can see here from this picture how the light tanks are positioning themselves so they minimize their exposure to any sight lines for the enemy medium, and the infantry are pushing up and getting support from them. It's a very fine balance in between the two. Now the Recon tanks can sort of do whatever for the most part since they're one shot anyways. This is that Puma down here that just got wiped. Okay, let's go and keep going through.
Everybody, rocket sails overhead. Once Stewie's made their way inside the hard cap, they're going to be providing some Sizelix. And the Stewie crew smashing that decimated.
Here we have the Panzer IV back here that just took a shot. They're beginning to back up, but the Lukeses are still up here. And they're splashing around and hoping to protect the outposts that were reset by the squad lead since the point was just capped by the Allies. The Stubies are still in the point supporting because they know they can't move forward because the Panzer IV is still out here. So they're just one shot away from being wiped off the point. It's all about positioning. All about positioning. The light tanks can support the infantry. The medium tanks will play a little peek battle and understand, okay, hey, is there over there? The commander will want to run a recon in order to spot, hey, this is where the enemy medium might be. But that communication feed off the opening is so key, and that way for your tanks to know, hey, this is where the opening medium is. Let's see if we can maybe make a play around the flank and see what we could do there. And like I mentioned before, the Recon tank is sort of a wild card in the opening. Here we have the Allied Recon, the Greyhound, making their way around. So they went probably through the north of Chapel right there, or maybe all the way around, and they're going up from the north to the south. And what they're doing is that they've researched the map ahead of time, most likely. They're very familiar with this. I mean, some players have played Utah 50, 60, 70, 80 times in the competitive world. They're very familiar where the enemy opening garrisons are, where the outposts are, all that sorts of stuff. But as long as this crew knows where the enemy medium is, which they probably had recon or something to tell them. We see this mark right there, very faint. But they know where the Panzer IV is, so they don't have to worry about that. They just have to worry about Axis AT. This Greyhound will be able to go into the back line and wipe a garrison here, wipe a garrison down here, and then any OPs that they see along the border in which they're going. And keep in mind that the communication is being fed in their command chat, in the enemy's command chat as well. The Panzer IV commander is hearing, oh my gosh, there's a Greyhound in the background. We have to make sure we pay attention to that. It's up to the north right now, but it's going to be moving down to the south. It may try to head back here. It may try to get an angle on us and fire from the rear. Who knows? But those are things that the Recon team usually has a great advantage in doing. Off the opening is causing a whole bunch of chaos in the back line, wiping outposts, wiping garrisons. On the opposite side, a little side tip is make sure that your team has AT off the opening, rocket AT to be able to spot those Greyhounds, those light tanks, those Recon tanks, those sorts of things going in the background trying to mess up your whole game plan. But this Greyhound is providing huge value because it's a free tank, it's wiping outpost garrisons, all that sorts of stuff, and it's also cluttering up the command comms. And this Panzer IV can't just focus on the east, the spotter has to look around and understand where the enemy tanks may be coming from. That's sort of the first point I wanted to go over, is to understand the terrain, understand what your opening will look like, what is the most optimal tank position, look at previous videos to understand, hey, this is where these are the most common tank approaches that we see on this map. Here's how we can best prepare for that. Then when it comes to recapping a point, here we have Win 7 once again. And we see that the Axis are starting to get some cap pressure. When it comes to figuring out where your tanks can make a impact for recapping a point, you can also just refer to your opening and what you studied as to where the best sight lines are. Now here we have one Tiger right there. I think we have another Tiger somewhere up to the north behind here, or maybe back here actually. But these tanks, when thinking about Win 7, the airhead was just called in, and I think the airhead will be landing right behind the building right there. But where can these tanks have a really good impact? Well, they can pretty much go where their Luxes were. This tank can go up here, take this angle side of the hedge, or the shed, and then this tank over here can push to the hedge and get on that side. And these Tigers can angle themselves so they can cover each one of the sides, and they can be able to splash the point as well. Now, granted, you're going to be exposed to precision strikes when you're in such a small area, so you have to make sure to listen above and listen to command chat callouts. But it's going to, if you're in the strong point like that, because the circle is right on the edge here, you're going to be able to offer a lot of cap weight for your team inside the point. You're going to be able to splash HE around here, around there with the Tigers, and you'll be able to poke out with the barrel and just mow them down with the coax as well. The opposite side, it forces a 76 if they're losing the point, especially if the infantry is getting wiped. Because remember, tanks not only can cap a point, or tanks by themselves usually won't be able to cap a point. It takes infantry support. But if the infantry is getting wiped by artillery back here, tanks are pushing up, they're splashing, and the enemy infantry is able to make a move into the complex right here. And then it's going to force the 76s, on the ally side in this case, to be reactionary or to react to all this and maybe force themselves into a very risky push to maybe go around on the corner over here and get an angle to fire to the south, or flank around here and then move around to get an angle to get some fire on the Tigers. All around, I mean, they're very exposing. They're exposing themselves. Most likely won't be able to get that first shot in. The Tigers will, and it'll really set them up to losing the engagement. Those are the things you want to keep in mind when recapping your point with your heavy tanks. Just think of what you did during the opening and what you can maybe tweak a little bit to offer to recap the point. And then one more thing, you should also, in some cases, if you need to get out of cover in your tank, you should know where you should expect to take a shot. It's okay for heavies to just take one shot from another heavy, but sometimes that's what you just need to sacrifice in order to get to a point in time. And then you can repair on later, as long as you get into a nice comfy spot. Tip number 2 we're going to talk about is using buildables. This will be pretty quick, but you want to be able to take advantage of what the game offers in terms of buildables. And one of the most common uses of buildables are stilts. Stilts are when you put 2 barricades, sometimes 3 barricades, right next to each other pretty much. Okay, here we have an example on SME where the tank is able to get up on these 4 barricades here, and they're able to get a little bit more elevation and to see over walls and maybe down a certain alleyway. And here, by using the stilts, the tank will be able to get a little bit of elevation in order to see the enemy a little bit quicker than the enemy can see them. Okay, here on Utah, we see stilts being used right here. We see the 2 barricades set up, and so the tank will be able to climb up on those barricades, and they will be able to look towards Win 7 and have the hedge as a little bit of protection below them. And if they could take a shot, they could back up, because the driver is usually always in reverse. The driver is always told to stay in reverse, so in that case, if they take a shot, they can easily start backing up behind a hedge. But in this case, the stilts offer, once again, you're trying to get elevation to see the enemy where the enemy may not expect you to see them. Okay, the same thing goes with repair stations and Belgian gates. You want to be able to give your tanks the best advantage you can possibly give them. Here on Foy Night, we'll take a look at an example. Here's a short I recently created.
This Tiger is living fancy. 3 repair stations, a supply box, 3 Belgian gates.
Let's take a look at this. So we have 2 or 3 Belgian gates over here on the left side, and the tank can back up behind those or maybe use those in an extra angle in order to get an advantage on the enemy. They could take a shot, or the Belgian gates later in this latest update can be destroyed with tank rounds, but in this case, they can take some shots behind those and I'm pretty sure they can be destroyed with the latest update. But the Belgian gate should be able to take a round with the tank shots and be able to protect the tank. The tank also has the building, once again understanding the terrain, because on some maps, remember, the buildings aren't specifically listed, and you have to do some manual look over the map and maybe mark those by yourself. We have the Belgian gates right here, 1 buildable, and then we have 1, 2, 3 repair stations to help out that tank. And if that tank takes a shot, it can immediately start backing up and be able to repair and be good to go in a matter of a few seconds. The power of buildables is crazy when it comes to tanks. Just, you have to be innovative and really think outside the box when it comes to how can we use these different buildables to give our tanks an advantage. I've seen tanks climb up on repair stations. They climb up on the barricades like we just talked about. I've seen tanks build or make Belgian gates, and the tank will use that Belgian gate to climb on top of a building. You can think of it that way, but you have to really, once again, think outside the box when it comes to thinking, how can we use buildables to give our tanks the best competitive advantage? Third tip is to coordinate artillery with armor. And this here is an example, perfect example, is that if the armor crews they can't knock out this tank like they can here, because they're thinking, oh crap, he has 3 or 4 repair stations by him, and they're not able to if they get one shot in, the tank backs up, repairs, and is right back at it. Then it's a responsibility of that armor crew to relay the information to artillery to say, hey, can we get 5 or 6 rounds around this tank to knock out these repair stations back here, so the tank doesn't have such an easy time repairing. Now, the artillery guy has a responsibility of obviously relocating to the area, firing some shots, and then monitoring his structures destroyed to see if he's knocking out those repair stations. And of course, you can monitor your officers as well in case you are able to knock out the tank commander. But you want to coordinate artillery with armor and to best utilize that during a game to give your tanks another advantage. Because remember, if you shoot the tank and they have to get out repair, then the artillery can still fire in that area, knock out the crewman, which leaves the tank maybe down with one crewman. Usually the driver stays in at all times. Or, well, that gives your tank the opportunity to push up and knock out that enemy heavy in this case. Tip number 4 will be peeking hedges. Now, let's go through another example. Once again, tip number 4, we're talking about peeking. This is probably one of the most basic knowledge pieces in Hell Let Loose armor play. All tankers will give each other tips on how to do this properly, but here is probably the best example I can give that I've ever captured on stream. No offense to the WTH guys. But here we have on Carentan 2 tanks. So this tank right here is heading right here straight, and this tank right here is facing straight down a road. That is a sin in Hell Let Loose armor. Why? Because if this tank takes a shot, then where are they going to go? They get back up a little bit maybe and try to do a little weaving to get out of the way, but the enemy armor is going to get one shot in and then another shot right after that and knock him out. This tank right here is going to be able to push up, and if they angled to the left, they can peek down the road, and then they could take one shot and then reverse. Remember, the driver should always be in reverse. They back up, and then they can repair and get right back at it. Let's see how this plays out. Honey Badger calls him out. The tank crew is confident that they killed both of the tigers. They're good to go. They don't have to, or they killed one of the tigers. They're good to go. They don't have to worry about anything. And so they feel very confident that they can peek like this and they don't have an issue. However, Honey Badger disagrees.
We are good.
This 76 is moving across the road.
You go forward a little bit? Oh no, I'm good. I'm good.
Once again, the 76 is committing 2 sins. The barrel is facing to the right, away from that road that they're facing, front facing, and also the tank is front facing.
Bye, HB.
HB gets killed right there.
Bye.
The Sherman takes a shot right from the front. The barrel's facing this way, and oh my gosh, tankers out there would be screaming when they saw this. And now the 76, where does it go? It can start to turn, but the Tiger's already reloading. They're a couple seconds away from firing their second shot. And the 76 can back up a little bit maybe, like I said, but they have nowhere else to go.
Tiger peeks. Tiger gets the first shot in. The 76 is going to be caught. 76 is going to be caught. Oh.
First round misses.
Oh, and the Tiger misses the shot.
But once again, the 76 has nowhere to go.
Back up. The Tiger reverses. Will it try to peek and get that second shot in? The other 76.
The other 76 is running back to help save their buddies. And they're going to be, they have their barrel facing the right way, and the tank is trying to get in 4th gear to protect them. So great coordination here.
In reverse to come and save this 76.
But the 76 wasn't able to get out in time. Once again, because they're facing this way, they're trying to back up and maybe go another way. They're lucky the Tiger missed the second shot. But in this case, they had nowhere to go.
So 176.
This 76 does it the right way. They go down the alleyway. They have the barrel facing. They can peek, take a shot, and if they take a shot, they can just reverse and back up, and then they can repair. And would force the Tiger to play aggressive and try to push down the alleyway, exposing themselves to a whole bunch of AT fire or mines, whatever it may be on the road.
Dies. 76 lines up to take a shot. Ricks.
But that is probably the best example I've ever gotten on stream as far as front peeking and the risks you face when it comes to playing armor in Hell Let Loose. Okay, so that was tip number 4, everybody. Tip number 5. Now, communication is important for a lot of things, but for armor, it's incredibly important as well. So I figured it deserves its own separate point. And I'll make this very quick here, but things you need to communicate in armor is where you're going to have your opening, as we talked about before. What's the location? What does the terrain look like? Where do you spot the enemy medium? All those sorts of things. Then you want to stay around a garrison, watch the outposts around you to see if anything is lighting up, and it's a responsibility for your team to be able to call that out as well. That way you're alerted to saying that way you're alerted to enemy satchel players, AT players, just overall trying to sneak up to you and knock you out. But in this case, for this peeking example, this tank took a shot right away, and this tank immediately began to back up, head the other way, and helped out their buddy. So communication is so key, and it's just towards the end of the game especially, you want to just, hey, we've taken out 1 heavy tank, 2 heavy tanks, and just keep a tally of how many heavy tanks you've taken out, and you can sort of estimate how many enemy tanks that they should have, judging based. You could sort of take a guess on enemy encouraged and generation, fuel, But communication is so important. Understand when it's time to play conservative or aggressive. There are some games that you are going to be a part of that you've gotten wiped off the map multiple times in the first 30 minutes as far as armor goes. Maybe you've lost 3 heavies, 4 heavies, whatever it may be, and you have to understand when it's time to start dialing it back a little bit, because the commander, once again, is going to be under resource strain in order to get you up more heavies, and you want to be able to give the commander a little bit of flexibility to be able to use other things like bombing runs, strafing runs, airheads, whatever it may be, and not necessarily worry so much about converting everything to fuel because your tanks are getting absolutely smoked off the map. Now, of course, I'm not saying that all the time armor is playing very risky and they're being very careless. It's just you have to recognize, what I'm saying is you have to recognize when it's time to maybe just play a little bit defensively and wait till you gather up a little bit more resources, maybe stack 2, 3 heavies for the end of the game, for example, for a big push. You want to just be cognizant of saying, hey, we can't push as many tanks as we would like to. Let's just try to play it a little bit safely and save a little bit more fuel and just buy some time for us to really allocate some resources. That's all I'm saying. And then, of course, when it comes towards the end of the game, and that clock is ticking down, you want to be able to have 3 heavies, at least 2 or 3 heavies up on the field in order to help the team make a last ditch push towards the point. You don't want to go flank around Whiting in the back line and try to make a big play if you're really low on fuel. Now, if you're playing with a lot of fuel, then yeah, you could be a little bit more risky and just maybe make some bold pushes. If your tank runs out of ammo, you don't have to feel so pressured to run back to HQ to restock it. You can make that push towards the front line and just see what you can get. I've seen both sides of those. I've seen both sides of that being played, but you just have to, once again, be cognizant of the resources and just understand how much fuel you have, how many tanks you have at all times, and understand, hey, what does the next 10, 15 minutes look like? Or if you're approaching the last 20 minutes of the game, you have to understand the resource situation and really try to think of, hey, what does this look like from a team perspective? Should we take the risk now? Should we wait until the final minutes? Or can we do it all now and we'll be just fine? Those are the sorts of things you want to think about when it comes to the resource management and when to play conservative or aggressive. Okay. All right, guys, those were my 5 tips for today for armor. Plenty more to come in the future, but just wanted to get those out and just see what kind of questions or comments you guys have down below. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one, buddy.